They didn't even try to hide it. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't rifling through drawers or checking closets like some bitter old woman hungry for secrets. No, I was just reaching for my well-worn cookbook, the one with the cracked spine and butter-stained corners, when it slipped out. A postcard. Glossy, bright. A beach so blue it looked painted. Palm trees swayed across it, and the words, "Wish you were here," were scrawled in cheery silver ink. I almost smiled. Almost. Until I turned it over. There were signatures. So many signatures. My son's round, looping hand. His wife's neat, slanted script. The grandkids' bubbly scribbles. Hearts and smiley faces dotting every corner. Even the littlest one, bless her, had written her name in purple crayon. All of them. Every single one. Except mine. I stood there, frozen in the kitchen light, one hand still resting on the cookbook, the other trembling slightly as I held the card. The air smelled of rosemary and lemon, my supper still warm on the stove, though I no longer felt hungry. They hadn't told me they were going. There'd been no conversation, no invitation, not even a polite, "We weren't sure you'd be up for it, Mom." Just silence. The same silence I'd been learning to live with. The kind that creeps in after birthdays go unmentioned, after holidays pass without a call. The kind that makes you second-guess whether you've somehow become invisible in your own family. My eyes drifted to the postcard again. They had already signed it, already packed it, stamped it, written their wishes, and moved on with their plans. Without me. And for a moment, all I could do was stare at the corner of the card where my name should have been. I thought about the time I spent at their house last month, watering their ferns while they visited the cruise expo downtown. How my daughter-in-law had laughed over coffee, saying, "It's just couple stuff, you know?" "You'd be so bored." I'd smiled, nodded, said I understood, but I hadn't. Not then. Not until this moment, standing in my quiet kitchen, with my supper cooling behind me and a postcard in my hand that told me exactly where I stood, somewhere outside the frame. There was an old photo on the fridge, faded and curling at the edges of me and my late husband on our honeymoon cruise. He was laughing, wind whipping his hair, my arms wrapped around his waist. Back then, he used to say, "If they ever forget your name, darling, remind them who booked the tickets." Well, I guess I just did. The next day, the sun came through the lace curtains in soft rectangles. I was at the kitchen table, trimming stems from a small bouquet of chrysanthemums I'd picked up at the corner market. Not a holiday, not a birthday, just a little color to keep the kitchen from looking how it felt. The phone buzzed. It was my daughter-in-law, Alice. "Hi, Mary," she chirped, her voice clipped, distracted. I could hear the car blinker ticking in the background. "Quick question, could you maybe feed Jasper while we're gone? I left his dry food on the mudroom shelf and there's a timer for the litter box." "Of course," I said, though she was already halfway into another sentence. "Oh, and Mark says he'll bring over the spare key. He thought maybe Sunday?" "Oh, wait. Hang on, Noah. Stop teasing your sister. We're in traffic. Just a minute, Mary." I waited. The chrysanthemums dripped quietly onto the tablecloth. When she came back, her voice softened in that way people do when they think they've been too harsh. "Anyway, we're just trying to get everything in order. You know how it is before a big trip." I smiled, though she couldn't see me. "Yes," I said, "I do." She paused just a beat too long. "Oh, right, I guess you would." That was it. No follow-up. No, "Do you remember your first cruise?" Or, "You should tell the kids about that time in the Bahamas." Just static-filled silence on her end, and me pretending not to hear the ache in her voice, or maybe it was in mine. "We're doing a little send-off dinner Saturday night," she added. "Just the four of us. Something casual." 4. She didn't say it to be cruel. She just didn't count me. "I'll make sure the plants are watered too," I said. My voice sounded thinner than I wanted it to. "You're the best, Mary," she said, with that bright, cheerful tone that always felt like it had been pulled from a greeting card. "Really, I don't know what we'd do without you." And then she hung up. I sat there for a long time after that, the flowers still in my lap, my thumb idly tracing the rim of the little porcelain vase I'd bought at a yard sale years ago. There was a chip on one edge, barely visible unless you knew where to look, like most things in this house. Saturday evening came, and the neighborhood filled with the smells of charcoal grills and late summer dinners. Laughter drifted in through open windows. Somewhere someone was playing old jazz records. I watched their SUV pull out of the driveway, the kids bouncing in their seats, Alice waving her phone in the air as she tried to get the Bluetooth working. My son didn't glance back toward my porch, not once. I'd made a lemon tart that morning just in case. Not because they asked, just because it was something I used to do when Mark was little. He loved the one with the brown top and the flaky crust. I left it on their back porch with a note. Have a sweet send-off, Mom. I don't know if they brought it inside. I didn't go check. Instead, I made a simple supper. A piece of toast, a soft egg, a single slice of tomato from the garden. I ate it with the television off and the windows open. And when I finished, I poured myself a small glass of wine and sat on the back steps, the cool concrete pressing into my knees, listening to the cicadas hum their summer song. From inside the house, the silence curled around me. Not cruel, not loud, just casual, familiar, like absence with a polite smile. And I thought, not for the first time, how easy it is to be left behind when everyone thinks you've already made peace with being forgotten. I started noticing the mail arriving later. It used to come at 11:15 like clockwork. Arthur used to joke that the mailman was more reliable than most people, but lately it was past noon, sometimes close to 2, and still, I checked. Each day, even when I knew there'd be nothing but circulars and utility bills with my name printed too big in bold, impersonal ink, still, I checked, because you never know when someone might remember you. The postcard sat on the edge of the mantel now. I hadn't moved it, hadn't tucked it away in a drawer or thrown it out. I wasn't that proud. I kept it there, beside the photo of Arthur in his navy suit, the one where he's half smiling like he's about to say something. Sometimes I imagined what he'd say if he saw the card. They signed without you? Humph. Then they don't get the last word. He never liked being left out of anything, Arthur. I used to cook more. Not big meals, not anymore. But I liked making things with care. Toast with real butter. Jam in a saucer, not from the jar. A poached egg with a sprig of parsley, even if no one saw. Lately, though, I'd been letting the eggs go bad. Forgetting the parsley. Meals had turned into odd snacks, crackers and cheese. An apple. Sometimes just tea. The tea was always hot. Always poured into the same old cup. Blue and white porcelain with a faint chip on the rim. The same one I'd used since Mark was born. That chip, tiny as it was, had become a sort of landmark in my day. Every morning, I turned the cup in my hands, letting my finger find the nick. I don't know why I did it. Maybe just to prove that something in my life had stayed in place, even if so much else had gone blurry. Last Tuesday, I offered to take the kids to the library. Emma used to love the story rug. She'd lie on her stomach and trace the shapes on the carpet while I read aloud. But Alice smiled tightly and said, "They're a bit old for that now, Mary. They have their own devices." Devices. Everything had a screen now, and nothing had a face. Not really. "I understand," I said, smiling back. And I did. In a way. But that night I found myself folding laundry I hadn't worn, just for something to do. A shirt from the back of the closet. A pair of socks whose match I hadn't seen in months. I folded them carefully, smoothing each corner. Then I unfolded them and did it again. The house had never felt so quiet, not even after Arthur died. Back then, there were still calls. Neighbors stopping by. Family dropping in with casseroles and stories. Now the silence wasn't about loss. It was about redundancy. Like a book no one checks out anymore. On Thursday, the postcard slipped off the mantel. No wind, no tremor. It just fell. I heard it while making tea, that small papery sound. I came into the living room and stared at it for a long time before I bent to pick it up. The corner had curled slightly. The ink was still bold. "Wish you were here." I held it a while longer than necessary, then placed it back in its spot. But this time, I slid it just a bit behind Arthur's frame. Just a little. That afternoon, I walked past the mirror in the hallway. I paused, not out of vanity, not anymore, but because for a split second I hadn't recognized myself. The cardigan I wore was sagging at the shoulders. My hair hadn't been brushed since morning. And my eyes. My eyes looked like someone waiting at a station where no train ever comes. I don't remember walking away. Only that later, I found myself sitting by the window, watching a neighbor's dog run circles in the yard. Round and round. No leash, No direction, just movement for the sake of it. That night, I drank my tea in silence and let my finger rest on the chip in the cup longer than usual. It felt smoother now, worn. Like maybe I'd traced it so many times I'd begun to erase the very thing that made it distinct. That's how it happens, isn't it? Not with one grand betrayal, not with shouting or slammed doors, but with silence, with unspoken decisions, with the way your name stops coming up in plans, with the way even a chipped teacup starts to lose its edge. It was the hat that brought it back. Arthur's old Panama, with the fraying ribbon and the little crease right above the brim. I'd kept it on the top shelf of the hallway closet, wrapped in tissue like something sacred. I hadn't touched it in years, not since the day we came home from that cruise, sunburned and tired and giddy with stories we couldn't wait to retell. But something about the postcard, about seeing my name missing from that list, made me reach for it. And as soon as my fingers found the familiar weave of the straw, the memory unfolded like a sail catching wind. It was the summer of 1978, our 25th anniversary. We boarded the ship with matching canvas bags, Arthur's hand firm around mine, his eyes already squinting toward the horizon as if he could see the adventure ahead. He wore that very hat, tilting it rakishly whenever I teased him about looking like a movie star. I can still smell the salt in the air, the faint sweetness of coconut oil, the citrus tang of the drink they handed us as we stepped onto the deck. And I can still hear his voice, deep, warm, entirely mine. "Let the kids call if they need us," he said, winking. "This week, we're nobody's parents, just Mary and Arthur, newlyweds again." We laughed then, loudly, boldly, the kind of laughter that turned heads and made young couples smile. We danced on the open-air terrace that night, barefoot on warm planks, the ocean wind tugging at my hem and lifting his hat. He caught it mid-air with a flourish and bowed like a fool, and I loved him for it. There was a photo from that evening, Arthur in his white linen shirt, me in a sundress the color of ripe peaches, our cheeks flushed from wine and sun. I had pinned it inside the cruise journal I kept back then, tucked between notes about our favorite port and a cocktail recipe I never quite got right. Guava something? We'd watch the sunset from the starboard side each night. He used to say it felt like the world paused just for us in those golden minutes, like even the ocean held its breath. And I remember thinking, this is what it means to be someone's center, to be looked at, not through. Back home, the kids were fine. They'd made do with casseroles I left in the freezer and a list of emergency numbers pinned to the fridge. But when we walked through the door, they raced toward us like we'd returned from the moon. I had forgotten what that felt like, being missed, being welcomed back. Now, standing in my quiet hallway with that hat in my hands, the ribbon a little more frayed, the straw a little more brittle, I felt the weight of the years between that trip and this moment settle in my chest. The postcard still sat tucked behind Arthur's photo, the cheery ink taunting me with its bright falsehood. Wish you were here. But I had been. Once. Not just there, but wanted. The hat trembled in my hands as I placed it gently on the edge of the bed. I ran a finger along the brim. That crease he always pressed in with his thumb was still there. A perfect dent, right in the center, like it was waiting for him to come back and wear it again. Maybe that's what this ache is. Not just the exclusion, but the stark contrast. To be so thoroughly seen once, and now so quietly forgotten. Later that night, I opened the old journal. The cruise ticket was still there, yellowed but intact. The pages smelled like salt and thyme. I flipped to the page with the photo. Our smiles blurred slightly with age, but unmistakable. We looked like the very best version of ourselves. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let the wind in that memory wash over me. The sun on my shoulders, Arthur's arm around my waist, the world wide open and full of welcome. I don't think it's just about the cruise. It's about that feeling of standing at someone's center, and I think I want that again, even if I have to stand there alone. The text came on a Thursday morning. Just 4 words. We'll swing by soon. No punctuation, no day, no time. But I read it 3 times, heart fluttering in that old familiar rhythm, the one that still hadn't learned not to expect too much. I set the phone down gently on the kitchen counter and smoothed the front of my blouse as if preparing to receive company right that moment. Soon, that word stretched long and bright in my mind. I wiped the counters. tidied the throw pillows. Even laid out a small plate of butter cookies from the tin I kept in the cupboard just in case. I made a fresh pot of tea around noon, the good leaves, not the bagged kind. The chipped teacup waited, patient and proud. I checked the mirror in the hallway and dabbed a little color on my lips. Something soft, something cheerful. By 2 o'clock, I was still waiting. By 3, I'd refilled the kettle, reheated the tea. Outside, the clouds began to gather. One of those heavy late summer skies that can't decide between a storm or just brooding. By 4, I finally sat down, hands curled around the warm cup, watching the steam disappear into nothing. The cookies remained untouched. When the knock finally came just before 5, my heart leapt, too eager, too certain. I smoothed my hair back as I crossed the room. It was Mark. Just him. He stood on the porch in his work clothes, tie loosened, shoulders slumped. He gave me a brief smile, quick, tired, and glanced at his watch before saying, "Thought I'd drop off the spare key." "The one for Jasper?" I asked, voice careful, controlled. "Yeah," he said. "Alice is running errands with the kids. She'll probably text you later." He handed over the key. I took it gently, trying not to notice how quickly his hand withdrew. "Do you want to come in for tea?" I asked, gesturing behind me. "I've just made a fresh pot." He hesitated, then glanced at the car idling behind him. "Can't today. We've got dinner plans. Alice's parents are in town." I nodded. "Of course. Another time." He looked relieved. "Yeah, soon." There it was again. That word. I smiled. The same practice smile I'd worn at countless school plays and rushed goodbyes at airport gates. He turned to go, then paused. "Hey," he said, squinting slightly. "Did you get that postcard we were going to send? From the travel agent?" My stomach turned. I nodded. "Yes." He looked sheepish, the kind of expression people wear when they sense they've stepped on something they hadn't realized was fragile. "We figured, since it's mostly couple stuff. And the excursions, well, we didn't want you to feel out of place." Out of place. He said it kindly. That was the worst part. He believed it was kind. "I understand," I said. He smiled again, that same thin smile. "Okay, well, thanks again for feeding the cat." And then he left, just like that. I watched the taillights disappear down the street, then turned back into the house, the quiet rushing up to meet me like a cold wind. The tea had gone lukewarm. The cookies sat on the plate, untouched. I poured the cup down the sink, rinsed the teacup slowly, tracing the chip with my thumb one more time before setting it back on the shelf. The postcard still peeked out from behind Arthur's photo, its bright beach scene suddenly sharper than before. The memory of his voice came back to me. "If they ever forget your name, darling, remind them who booked the tickets." My fingers hovered over the phone, then lowered. No text would change it now. No knock, no cup of tea, no soon. Hope, when it fades, doesn't go with thunder. It goes with silence. And that's when I knew. If I wanted to be seen again, I'd have to sign my own name. The spoon slipped from my fingers. It clattered against the edge of the sink and landed in the empty basin with a hollow metallic sound. Not loud, not sharp, just final. I stood there for a moment, staring at it. A plain silver spoon, water-spotted and worn, the same pattern we'd used for 40 years. Arthur's favorite. He used to say it fit his hand just right. It looked so small lying there, so insignificant. But I couldn't bring myself to pick it up. Not right away. My hands were damp from rinsing dishes, but it wasn't the water that made them tremble. It had been 3 days since Mark's visit. No text, no call, no note slid through the door with last-minute apologies. Just the same quiet routines filling my day like fog. I swept the porch, watered the plants, paid the electric bill online, and deleted the grocery coupons I used to save for family visits that never came. The bouquet on the kitchen table had wilted petals curled inward like hands too tired to open. I hadn't thrown them away. It was almost a comfort now, their slow decay. Something else quietly fading with me. That evening I didn't cook. I opened a can of soup and left it on the stove too long. When I finally poured it into a bowl, it looked like something served in waiting rooms, colorless, lukewarm, forgettable. I didn't sit at the table. Just stood at the counter, eating slowly, spoon by spoon, until I stopped halfway through and set it aside. It tasted like wallpaper. like routine, like surrender. Afterward, I walked through the house like a visitor in a museum of someone else's life. The room still bore traces of joy, the hallway lined with faded drawings from the grandchildren, the living room clock Arthur used to wind, the small dent in the wall from the time Mark tripped during a game of chase, echoes of love, now quiet as dust. I stopped at the hallway closet. The top shelf still held Arthur's Panama hat. My hand hovered near it, but I didn't reach for it this time. Instead, I reached down and pulled out my suitcase. The good one. Leather corners, quiet wheels. I'd bought it years ago for a trip we never took. Arthur had fallen sick that spring. I'd stored it away after he passed, telling myself there would be time, that someone someday would invite me somewhere worth packing for. But no one ever did. I sat on the edge of the bed with the suitcase at my feet, and then, without knowing exactly why, I reached into my nightstand drawer and pulled out the small mirror I used to keep in my purse. I hadn't used it in months. The face that stared back at me wasn't unfamiliar. It was just dulled, like a photograph left too long in the sun. My eyes, once so sharp in color, had softened to gray. I touched the lines around my mouth. They deepened, sure. But the ache there wasn't from age. It was from holding things in too long. The hat box sat on the shelf above. I reached for it slowly, cradled it like something sacred. I opened it, just to see, just to feel the memory in my hands. The ribbon on the hat had unraveled slightly. I smoothed it out gently and thought about the cruise, the one where I danced barefoot and laughed until I ached. The one where I was chosen, central, seen. And now I was the spare key, the backup plan, the extra plate that never made it to the table. I set the hat back inside, but this time, I didn't close the lid. Instead, I reached for the postcard again, its edge still curled from where it had fallen. I stared at it for a long time, then flipped it over. Still the same bold, cheery script. "Wish you were here!" But they hadn't. Not really. They'd wished for the idea of me. The caretaker, the cat feeder, the polite afterthought who wouldn't ask for a seat at the table. I traced the names with my finger, one by one, each in a different ink, a different handwriting, all bright, all certain, and nowhere was my name. I placed it on the bed next to the suitcase, and suddenly the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic, just two of them, rolling down like apologies I'd never receive. I didn't wipe them away. They slid down, disappeared into the fabric of my blouse, leaving nothing behind. Like everything else, I didn't sleep that night, not from worry, not even from sadness. The kind of tired I felt didn't need rest. It needed something else, something I hadn't given myself in a very long time. Permission. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional groan of the pipes. I sat in my armchair by the window, the one with the flattened cushion and the view of the neighbor's hydrangeas, and I just existed. My hands rested in my lap. In one palm, I held the postcard. In the other, the chipped teacup. The chip had started to smooth out from so many mornings of being traced. I hadn't noticed until now how that small imperfection had become part of the shape. How it had lost its sharpness over time, not from repair, but from repeated contact. Worn down by gentleness. I looked at the postcard again. "Wish you were here!" The exclamation point mocked me. I turned it over and stared at the photo of the beach. The colors seemed louder now, oversaturated, unreal. But what really caught me, was the shadow of a palm tree in the corner, bending slightly in the breeze. It looked like it was bowing. I sat with that for a while. That bend, that give. I'd spent so many years bending, shrinking, making room, offering softness in place of space. Letting my presence grow quiet so others could feel loud. And in return, I'd become forgettable, even to the people I'd once built my entire life around. I placed the teacup down carefully, then stood. The suitcase still sat at the foot of the bed, untouched, waiting. I didn't unzip it, not yet, but I did something else. Something small, something I hadn't done in years. I went to the hall closet and took out the navy jumpsuit, the one I bought 5 years ago after seeing it in the window of that shop near the ferry dock. Too expensive, too bold. Too much for church, I'd said. Arthur would have called it a showstopper, then winked like I was the only woman in the world. I'd never worn it. Tonight, I slipped it from the hanger and held it up to my body in the mirror. It still fit, still shimmered slightly at the seams like it remembered the kind of woman who'd once chosen it. I smiled, just a little. A quiet smile. The kind that starts in your chest before it reaches your face. Then, gently, I laid the jumpsuit across the open suitcase. Next came the sandals, the pearl earrings, and last, the Panama hat. I didn't wrap it in tissue this time. I simply placed it on top, crown facing up, like it deserved to breathe. I returned to the postcard one last time, but instead of placing it back on the mantel, I brought it with me to the small desk by the window. I opened the drawer where I kept my pens, the good ones, and without hesitation, wrote my name in bold across the bottom. Just one word, Mary. I underlined it once. Then I placed the card flat on the desk and turned off the light. And in the quiet that followed, I heard it. Not a voice, not the creak of a floorboard or the groan of old pipes, but something else entirely. Resolve. The kind that doesn't announce itself, but moves like deep water, silent, steady, and impossible to stop. I still hadn't booked anything. I hadn't told anyone, but something in me had shifted. No more waiting for room at someone else's table. No more asking to be remembered. The chip on the teacup would still be there in the morning, but I wouldn't trace it anymore. The morning light poured through the blinds in stripes, warming the hardwood beneath my feet. The house was still, the kind of stillness that used to feel lonely but now felt expectant. I boiled water, poured a fresh cup of tea into a different mug, one without a chip. A simple white one, smooth and clean. I didn't reach for the old cup this time. I let it sit in the cupboard, untouched. It had done its time. On the kitchen table lay the postcard. My name still glared back in the bold script I'd added the night before. Mary. No longer an afterthought, no longer a blank space. I took my tea to the sunroom and opened the curtains wide. The world outside was just waking neighbors walking dogs, a paperboy tossing folded newsprint onto wet driveways, the occasional bird darting between the garden hedges. I watched all of it while I sipped, and then I stood, walked to the desk in the hallway, and opened the drawer that held my paperwork, neatly labeled folders for insurance, Arthur's pension, the joint savings account we'd opened back when phones still had cords. I pulled out my passport, still valid. I held it in my hands for a long moment, rubbing my thumb over the raised gold letters like they were a talisman. Then I picked up the phone. No hesitation this time. No lingering finger over the dial pad. "Hello," I said when the cheerful voice answered. "I'd like to make a booking." The agent, her name was Gabriella, asked if I had a cruise in mind. I told her I wanted the same ship, the same line my family would be boarding. The Royal Coral, departing Sunday. "I see. There are still a few rooms left," she said. "Do you have a preference for deck or view?" "Yes," I said, straightening my shoulders even though no one could see me. "The best you have." A pause. "Our presidential suite is still available. It includes private balcony, concierge service, priority dining." "I'll take it. It's our most expensive option, ma'am." "I know." Her tone shifted, just slightly. Respect, maybe, or curiosity. She read out the price. I didn't flinch. I gave her the card number, the same one they'd used to buy their excursions and drinks and matching luggage sets. Funny how quickly the numbers flipped from invisibility to action. Once the booking was confirmed, she asked if I wanted to add a personal message to the reservation. I paused, then smiled. "No message," I said. "They'll understand." I spent the afternoon packing, not in a rush, not with that frantic energy that used to come with family trips. This time it was slow, intentional. 2 sundresses, one in soft blue, the other in coral. The navy jumpsuit I'd already laid out. My sandals, my wide-brimmed straw hat, the pearl earrings, and Arthur's Panama. That went in last. I packed it gently, wrapped in a silk scarf, and placed it in its own compartment like it was something living. By evening, everything was ready. I didn't tell anyone. Let them imagine me home, watering plants, feeding the cat. Let them believe what they needed to believe. I didn't leave a note, not out of spite, but because there was nothing to explain. I wasn't running away. I was walking toward something. Later that night, I opened the drawer in my nightstand and took out the small leather-bound photo album. Just a few pages old snapshots from that first cruise with Arthur. Us laughing on the deck, dancing, sitting on a bench with the sea behind us and sunset in our hair. I slipped the album into my carry-on bag. A companion, a witness. As the sun set behind the neighbor's fence, I stood in the doorway and took in the house, the way you do before leaving a place you've lived in for a long time. The lamps cast warm halos on the walls. The dining room chair still creaked when I leaned against it. The portrait above the mantel watched me with still, patient eyes. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I turned off the lights, locked the door, pulled my suitcase behind me on its quiet wheels. No goodbyes, no announcements. Just me, the crisp night air, and the steady sound of forward motion. The port was already buzzing when I arrived. Families clustered around kiosks. Luggage clattered against pavement. Children squealed, couples laughed, and the sea stretched out behind it, all wide, blue, endless. I stood in the priority boarding line, a pearl-button blouse tucked neatly into my white slacks, Arthur's Panama hat resting light atop my silvered hair. My suitcase stood beside me, perfectly upright, silent like me. When the attendant read my name off the manifest, she smiled. "Presidential Suite, Ms. Lell. Welcome aboard." She said it so simply. Not Grandma, not Ma'am, just Ms. Lell. The name fit like a tailored glove. As I stepped onto the gangway, the breeze caught the edge of my blouse, and I paused. The sea air kissed my skin, and I didn't look back. The suite was brighter than I expected, walls washed in cream, light pooling in through full-length windows that opened to a private terrace. A bowl of fresh fruit waited on the table. Orchids stood by the bedside. Even the towels were folded with care, but it was the stillness that struck me. Not empty, not lonely, just mine. I unpacked slowly, placing each item with intention. The jumpsuit hung crisply in the closet. The photo album rested on the nightstand beside the bed. The postcard? That? I held a moment longer. I ran my thumb along the ink of their names. Mark, Alice, the children. Then mine. Added last. Written with purpose. I took the card to the small writing desk by the window. And from the drawer, I pulled a simple gold clip and affixed it to the corkboard mounted above the desk. Not hidden, not flaunted, just visible, just there. Then I stepped onto the terrace. The ocean shimmered. A gull wheeled high above the ship. Somewhere below, laughter echoed from the main pool deck. And that's when I saw them. My family. Not 20 feet away, clustered by the bar. Alice's hat tilted just so. Mark's shirt already wrinkled. The kids bouncing between loungers, drinks in hand, sun on their faces. They hadn't seen me. Not yet. I didn't wave. I didn't duck. I simply stood, one hand resting on the railing, the other gently touching the brim of Arthur's hat. And then I turned, walked back inside, and opened the small safe in the closet. I placed the blue folder inside, the one I'd brought from home, filled with account papers, signed forms, the quiet, powerful remnants of a life lived carefully. And then I locked it, not out of fear, but because it no longer belonged to them, not the way it once had. This room, this view, this moment was mine. A soft knock sounded at the door. Room service. A young man in a navy blazer wheeled in a tray, a glass of chilled Riesling, a small plate of shrimp cocktail, and a note folded atop a cloth napkin. "Would you like anything else, Ms. Lell?" he asked. "No," I said, my voice calm. "This is perfect." He nodded, disappeared. I took the postcard from the corkboard and set it gently on the dining table. And beside it, I laid one more thing, the chipped teacup, wrapped carefully in linen, carried all this way. I placed it beside the card not broken, not discarded, but no longer pressed to my lips every morning. A symbol of what I had clung to, and what I had now let go. Then I stepped back onto the terrace, glass in hand, the sun beginning its slow descent across the water. Below, my family still hadn't noticed. And for the first time, I didn't mind. The first night passed without incident. No knock, no surprise discovery. I ate dinner alone in the formal dining room, seated beside the window. A single candle flickered beside my plate. I wore the navy jumpsuit. Not to impress. Not to prove. Just because I liked how it made me feel, upright, centered, unmissable. I listened to the soft murmur of conversation all around me. Silverware against porcelain. Laughter trailing like perfume from table to table. I didn't rush. I didn't look for them. And when I returned to my suite, the room welcomed me like an old friend. The bed turned down, a square of dark chocolate on the pillow, the ocean unfolding endlessly beyond the terrace doors. Peace wasn't loud, I found. It was the sound of your own breath in a quiet room. The next morning, I dressed simply white blouse, linen trousers, a silk scarf tied gently at the throat. I walked the deck early, before the crowds arrived. Just me and the sea breeze and the scent of brewing coffee from the cafe 2 levels down. That's when I saw them. Clustered near the pool, half awake and sun-dazed, eyes squinting against the light. Mark with a towel slung over one shoulder. Alice rubbing sunscreen into her arms, the kids half bickering, half laughing, bouncing in and out of the shallow end. They didn't see me at first, but when I turned to go, something shifted. My grandson, the oldest, spotted me. His eyes widened slightly. Then he waved. Not the grand, guilt-stricken wave of someone caught. Just a wave. Grandma? I turned back. He was already climbing out of the pool, dripping and grinning, a towel dragging behind him. He reached me in a few seconds, breathless. I didn't know you were here. I smiled softly. Neither did I, until I was. He looked sheepish then, looked over his shoulder. Mom didn't. I thought they said it was couples only. I let the pause speak for itself, and then I offered him my hand. Come walk with me. We didn't say much as we moved down the deck together. Just small things, his school, his favorite subject, a funny story about the dinner rolls being too hard last night. He didn't ask why I came. He just accepted it, and that somehow was everything. Later that afternoon, I returned to my suite alone. There was a note slipped under the door. Mom, we didn't know. Please join us for dinner tonight. We have a table by the window. If you want. No pressure. Mark. I sat with it for a long while. Then I tucked it gently inside the photo album, not to forget, but to remember exactly how it felt, exactly what it took to arrive here. That evening, I did not go to their dinner table. Not out of bitterness, but because I already had my reservation. In the formal dining room again, same window, same candle. And this time, I brought the album. I opened it to the photo of Arthur and me wined in our hair, sunlight in our smiles. I set it beside my plate like a companion, like a witness to the fact that I was still here, still whole, still mine. When dessert came, I asked for the lemon tart. They didn't have it on the menu, but the chef sent out a slice anyway. It was just right. Tart, sweet, unexpected. I took my time. After dinner, I returned to the suite. The air was soft and warm on the terrace. I brought my chair close to the railing, the sea wide and dark before me. The stars overhead scattered like promises not yet broken. And then, for the first time in a very long time, I breathed deeply, not waiting, not hoping, just being. I looked at the postcard still resting on the desk, my name still there, scrawled in ink. I smiled and turned it over one last time. With a small, even hand, I wrote 3 new words on the front, beneath the glossy palm trees. I am here. Then I pinned it back to the corkboard, not behind anything, front and center, like it belonged, like I belonged. Because sometimes you don't wait for an invitation. Sometimes you sign your own name. The first night passed without incident. No knock, no surprise discovery. I ate dinner alone in the formal dining room, seated beside the window. A single candle flickered beside my plate. I wore the navy jumpsuit. Not to impress, not to prove, just because I liked how it made me feel upright, centered, unmissable. I listened to the soft murmur of conversation all around me. Silverware against porcelain, laughter trailing like perfume from table to table. I didn't rush, I didn't look for them. And when I returned to my suite, the room welcomed me like an old friend. The bed turned down, a square of dark chocolate on the pillow, the ocean unfolding endlessly beyond the terrace doors. Peace wasn't loud, I found. It was the sound of your own breath in a quiet room. The next morning, I dressed simply white blouse, linen trousers, a silk scarf tied gently at the throat. I walked the deck early before the crowds arrived. Just me and the sea breeze and the scent of brewing coffee from the cafe 2 levels down. That's when I saw them, clustered near the pool, half awake and sun-dazed, eyes squinting against the light. Mark with a towel slung over one shoulder. Alice rubbing sunscreen into her arms, the kids half bickering, half laughing, bouncing in and out of the shallow end. They didn't see me at first, but when I turned to go, something shifted. My grandson, the oldest, spotted me. His eyes widened slightly. Then he waved. Not the grand, guilt-stricken wave of someone caught. Just a wave. Grandma? I turned back. He was already climbing out of the pool, dripping and grinning, a towel dragging behind him. He reached me in a few seconds, breathless. I didn't know you were here! I smiled softly. Neither did I. Until I was. He looked sheepish then, looked over his shoulder. Mom didn't. I thought they said it was couples only. I let the pause speak for itself, and then I offered him my hand. Come walk with me. We didn't say much as we moved down the deck together, just small things, his school, his favorite subject, a funny story about the dinner rolls being too hard last night. He didn't ask why I came. He just accepted it, and that somehow was everything. Later that afternoon, I returned to my suite alone. There was a note slipped under the door. Mom, we didn't know. Please join us for dinner tonight. We have a table by the window. If you want, no pressure. Mark. I sat with it for a long while. Then I tucked it gently inside the photo album. Not to forget, but to remember exactly how it felt. Exactly what it took to arrive here. That evening, I did not go to their dinner table. Not out of bitterness, but because I already had my reservation. In the formal dining room again, same window, same candle. And this time, I brought the album. I opened it to the photo of Arthur and me, wind in our hair, sunlight in our smiles. I set it beside my plate like a companion, like a witness to the fact that I was still here, still whole, still mine. When dessert came, I asked for the lemon tart. They didn't have it on the menu, but the chef sent out a slice anyway. It was just right. Tart, sweet, unexpected. I took my time. After dinner, I returned to the suite. The air was soft and warm on the terrace. I brought my chair close to the railing, the sea wide and dark before me, the stars overhead scattered like promises not yet broken. And then, for the first time in a very long time, I breathed deeply, not waiting, not hoping, just being. I looked at the postcard still resting on the desk, my name still there, scrawled in ink. I smiled and turned it over one last time. With a small, even hand, I wrote 3 new words on the front, beneath the glossy palm trees. I am here. Then I pinned it back to the corkboard, not behind anything, front and center, like it belonged, like I belonged. Because sometimes you don't wait for an invitation. Sometimes you sign your own name.